Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm Brian Doyle, and I'm here with Tim McNeil and Rob Rogers. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you as well.
See you. Good to be back.
It's good. You know, this is 2 in a row where we've had the full band back together. I think that's been a little bit of a challenge for us during the holiday season.
Got a stretch going here.
On a good week, we'd have 2 out of the 3 of us, but it's good to have everybody back. And as we all know, it's the new year, and it being the new year, it's selling season again. So everybody's back in their seats doing their jobs. And, you know, we'd like to now introduce our guest who will probably talk a little bit about how his tool can help you with sales along the way in our conversation today. But we'd like to welcome Jeff Farris from CloudRadial to the show. Jeff, how are you today?
Doing great, guys. Glad to be with you on the start of what I think is going to be a really good year, really interesting year.
It's going to be a very interesting year. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely agree with that.
A lot of changes coming for sure.
Just a few.
But, you know, we love to kick off these shows by learning a little bit about the person behind the screen here. And, you know, Jeff, maybe tell us a little bit about how you found your way into the MSP community. And obviously, you know, what drove you to maybe start up CloudRadial.
Well, if you look at my age, this could be a long story, right? So I'll
There's a lot of gray hair on the screen.
I'll just try to keep it really quick. But, you know, long ago, far away, I had a company that focused on local area networks, right? Back when we were sharing hard drives, right? You know, not cloud drives, hard drives, right? And, you know, that was basically dominated by VARs and you know, the VARs that have become the MSPs of today. And, you know, that company did really well with it, sold it, got back, and then got away from the MSP space, and then got intrigued a few years ago based on my brother-in-law and a friend with their MSP practices, and got re-engaged with the whole space again, and how much had changed, and in some ways how little had changed in that same process. So, you know, I feel like I've been in this MSP space for 40 years. And then for 4, you know, so I mean, and it's, you know, it's a very interesting industry that we work in.
I think that's a great statement, though. You know, It changes about every 4 or 5 years, but yet some things never change, right? And I think that's a big part of the industry challenge is adapting to where the tide is changing and figuring out where to take their practices and integrating new things like AI into the conversation thread that weren't traditionally things, you know, applications, things like that didn't fall to the MSP going back 10 years ago, right? We were purely infrastructure guys for the most part.
Yeah, it's changes every, you know, my sense is it changes every 8 to 10 years, you know, in the sense that every 8 years, we're talking about something completely different, right? And 8 years ago, you know, the iPhone, iPads were still kind of new. Mobility was still kind of cool, but emerging. And, you know, everything was infrastructure. I mean, everything was on-prem, you know. Oh my goodness, we're gonna lose our, you know, our local exchange servers. What are we going to do for a business? And, you know, but again, this goes back to, again, for me, it starts with trying to share a hard drive, right? I mean, we see some serious changes. And MSPs are on the forefront of all of this change, trying to adapt and expand. And again, 8 years from now, it's going to be AI or whatever succeeds AI, right? I mean, it's not that you can't put off this change. It's just how do you adapt to it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've seen just even since Rob and I have been in the industry, and I'm going back to 2009, it really has cycled over twice in that period of time. And it's the AI is going to be the next. Maybe we all know where it's going. It's going to absolutely streamline, maybe not everything, but a majority of things. And it's pretty amazing how quick things have been evolving over the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's scary. You know, so ever since OpenAI became public, right? I mean, I was watching an interview the other day, and it surprised me because the guy that was responsible at OpenAI for a lot of the infrastructure and thought process behind it was surprised at the way it worked, right? It was surprised by the outputs that it was producing. And that's I hadn't seen that before, right? I hadn't seen that in this industry where somebody's surprised by what they created, right? So I don't know if that's a good thing or a really scary thing. Right?
I think there's a little of both on that.
Right.
Not often do we hear, I got more than I was expecting, right? That's really what you're hearing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially by somebody that's not even sure how it works internally, right? Because again, if you look at the compute power that goes on, it's hard to see a cycle, it's hard to see a process all the way through, right? So.
Perfect. So, maybe Jeff, kind of, we've got a little bit of a background now, how you ended up in the MSP world and what you had done there. How did CloudRadial originate?
So CloudRadial, again, when I get back in the space, after, 20-year gap or more, I'm helping my brother-in-law actually work through his transition from Microsoft CSP to an MSP. And he had a lot of clients. And when you start looking at how you manage clients at scale, there's not really a tool in place that allows you to do that from the MSP side. I mean, the business reviews are great unless you got to do 500 of them, right? If you've got to do 50 of them, it's really hard, right? And so then you start ending up kind of scaling back or just focusing on the one or two big ones, the ones that are, really principal. And yet you're asking everybody to pay money to you for the MSP services, but you don't have time to spend with them that you really need, right? And so one way to do it is to charge a premium and become that VCIO where they actually pay you for consulting time. Mm-hmm. And that's one aspect of it. But that's, there's so much expertise to, impart, and there's so many things to basically communicate because again, the MSP now operates in the shadows behind, in their office or, remote location. And so the client doesn't see them. They don't understand what they do. They don't understand security. They just, they expect security, but don't understand what's involved with it. So this really huge disconnect between the MSP and their clients was, as I was seeing at the time, was going to be a huge problem to grow in the business. And then when I had a chance to, kind of act on that, that's where CloudRadial came from, was the idea of like managing clients at scale and trying to create a relationship between the MSP and the clients, at least digitally, but also digitally with the idea that it would streamline and make the conversations more efficient, right? Because so much information was already pre-presented to the client, right? Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And, I know you and I travel in some of the same circles, and what I'm really seeing is the customers are really enjoying the portal aspect of what CloudRadial has to bring to the game, really being able to get in there and see their big picture in one single pane of glass has been something that I hear repeatedly from some of our customers at VCIO that are using CloudRadial as well as being one of the things that they've gravitated to and really have extended out to their end users. Maybe talk a little bit about, what steps you're taking to try to engage people, and get them involved, because portals traditionally have been tough to get people to adopt, the end users.
They are, and we're still evolving that. I mean, I still think it's a slope that is emerging, and I don't think we have it all figured out yet, but we've got some really cool things coming. One of the things, if you look at the MSP, again, most of the stuff ends up happening offsite and the client sees the invoice. So again, being able to present and be transparent with that client is really a big thing. We call the whole process engagement maturity, which is how you go from managing clients at scale from simply getting out of the chaos of, random phone calls and emails of ticketing, all the way up through, collaboration and eventually a strategic relationship with that client, essentially the VCIO relationship for every client, not just a select few. And so if you can present that information in the portal and help direct it through a client portal, that's a huge first step. And it becomes that platform for collaboration. So if you think about like a SaaS product, that's really essentially what a client sees an MSP as today, right? As another SaaS tool, right? Because it's a monthly recurring charge. They know it's essential to their business, like a Salesforce or a HubSpot or one of those tools, but they don't quite know what goes on, and they don't know how to really reach out except via support at email address, right? And if you have any SaaS product, there's not really many vendors left in this space that don't have some sort of SaaS portal to communicate that SaaS relationship, whether it's AT&T or Verizon or and now hopefully for MSPs with a CloudRadial to bring all of those touch points together in a single pane of glass, training, business review information, some reports, the consolidations of your reports or your analytics or your business review preparation reports can all be included in there. And it just gives that client the ability to see and have what I think they see as an IT hub, right? And so if you think about, we have an HR hub, right, typically to manage our payroll and manage our staff. And for a small business, now with CloudRadial, the MSP can present an IT hub, so they can basically work with that MSP in an online way, just like they do with every other vendor they work with. So it's a huge step, and it's part of this evolution from MSP being on site fixing servers to MSPs working remotely, delivering IT as a service rather than printer repair as a service, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, in terms of trying to up-level the relationship as well. We've certainly seen that the MSP community needs to kind of take more of that leadership role with their customers and not just come from an operational bent, because the landscape's changing. There's far less break fix than there once was. The customers are seeing more complex applications and need to know how these things could potentially help workflow. So there's a lot of opportunity in the MSP space to really become that CIO for those small to mid-sized customers that don't have one. And, we're just, I think, starting, and you probably agree with this, Jeff, just starting to see that evolution in the MSPs where they're seeing that they need to do that. And they're really stepping up their game to kind of meet the customer where the need lives.
Absolutely. And I think what's essential out there, again, if I go back 40 years when it was before MRR,
when we were selling boxes at 30% margins.
Selling boxes at maybe 100%, right? I mean, it was a great day and sometimes, right? But the problem is that every month started at zero. So the VAR, right, and the MSP of today had to have a very client-focused, sales-focused approach to client relationships, right? Because they had to sell it. And so they had to work with the clients, scope out the needs, deliver the needs, manage the needs, but then next month do it all over again. And one of the things with the tech focus and the stack focus and automation made the MSP a little less client communicative and much better at managing the tech stack. And so that's what we've seen over the last 10 years is a really big shift towards people automating their tech stack, growing their tech stack, implementing security, a whole variety of things. But the next phase that's coming, just like you mentioned, Brian, is AI, right? It's not only AI, it's analytics. It's a lot of collaboration. It's how do you deploy these things in scale inside a small business? Again, we're trying to, in our own business, we're trying to link together like a dozen different SaaS systems into a coherent whole, provide analytics on it, and then get AI insights on it. And that's, we're not that big a company to have that problem. And we're like every client that an MSP would have in a sense. They've got those same issues. But to do AI, analytics, and all the other things that I think are potentially emerging, you have to talk to the clients and you have to go back to that month to month. Where are you going with your business? What are you doing with your business? And how do we get you there with the business? Which means everything we're working on today has to run like clockwork and has to be thoroughly foundational, right? It's like with your payroll. If you don't really worry about whether you need to manage payroll or not, it's managed, right? And you add or subtract, and maybe you handle discrepancies here and there. But payroll, for the most part, is sort of an automated, well-running machine for most organizations because the systems are there to support it. I think IT's got to be there so we can have the conversations with the small business in order to grow that next step and be there 10 years out where the industry, I think, is headed.
Yeah, I think that's, excuse me, I think that's a great point. It doesn't matter how much automation, AI, any of that you're always going to have the human touch, right? And I think that's where people sometimes can confuse that point, just because we're heading into the AI world with the automation and everything kind of integrating together. The human touch and having those conversations to help businesses move forward, that's still going to be the most important thing, right? Everything
even
else
more important.
Supporting.
Yeah.
Everything else is supporting. That is going to be what drives people moving forward.
I agree.
That's a great point, Tim. I think, too, you've got AI right now being focused internally, which is how do we use AI to improve the quality of the tech staff? Well, a lot of stuff with AI and a lot of this stuff with automations is we're seeing needs, basically a higher skilled workforce inside that MSP. And it's really not hard to see that, a few years from now, the MSPs are typically going to have half as many staff at twice the payroll they have now, right? So, somebody you're paying $75,000 for a year now, well, maybe $150,000 a few years from now, but you'll have one of that person instead of two or three of that person, right? Because you need people that understand the AI issues. But then how you translate that for the client, how to get that benefit for the client, you need people that can see the opportunities inside the clients and wire it up and direct it internally to create their learning models for their business so they can thrive, right? And I don't think it matters whether you're a small business or a large business. I just think everybody's headed down this AI automation digital path. It's outstandingly opportunistic for an MSP, going forward, but it is change.
It's change, it's challenge, and it's being able to recognize business process drivers too, which is still something that a lot of MSPs are really just learning about themselves. As before going out to the client, I agree with a lot of the statements both you and Tim just made, Jeff, in terms of, it really comes down to that human touch layer and understanding what the customer wants for outcomes in order to really be able to design these things. Because, unlike when we were doing some of the things in the early days of IT, you can't just assume what the customer needs anymore. You really need to understand it so you're not building something incorrectly or, quite candidly, giving them answers that aren't going to really support their needs from their model.
Yeah, it's really, going back years ago, the idea of getting a PC out of the box, set up, deployed, working with Office installed, all of those things. That really was a very technical process and required, dedicated staff to go do that. Now I can send any of my team out to Best Buy to buy a Mac and they're good to go. They're ready to, again, the amount of labor and intelligence to manage it on the back end on onesie twosies, not very much, unless I want to use Intune. And then I need an Intune expert, who's not cheap to go in there and manage all of those machines at scale or, something similar. Because that's where the power to link things up, bring security, all of those things in, but it's no longer a setup, I remember putting memory chips, physically inserting memory chips, by the score into a circuit board, right? And I missed those days. That was simple.
Well, it was also at a time where the end users didn't know what they didn't know, right? So it was also, we spent some time just helping them understand how to use these things to get them to the next stage. Now we're dealing with a bunch of digital natives at this stage, people that understand the tools and really want more and more out of those tools. So, it's a constant learning curve, obviously, for the MSP and the community to stay out in front of those needs.
The whole idea in consulting is you have to be, 30 seconds ahead of your client, right? To be a good consultant, right? That's, and that's freaking hard today. 30 seconds ahead of your clients who are really smart, again, digital natives, as you said, it's hard not to be 10 hours behind, much less 30 seconds ahead, right?
It was really easy to be 3 hours ahead of our customers 15 years ago.
You just need to use the DOS copy command, and that will solve your problem.
Now, to your point, right? How do you keep from being 10 seconds behind them sometimes? And there's truth to that. But, I think there's, where there's challenge, there's opportunity. And to your point, Jeff, between analytics, AI, security is never going to go out of style. There's a lot of great opportunity for MSPs to continue to evolve and expand their operations as, cloud migrations have pretty much hit their peak, right? I think most people after COVID have moved what they needed to out to the cloud, and obviously break fixes weaning. There's just a whole lot of new opportunity. We all got to adapt to it. And certainly at CloudRadial, you're bringing one of the tools to help them do that at scale.
Yeah, and I think you've summarized it well. I think on your side, which is delivering outcomes, and deliver outcomes, you have to listen, right? And if you can create a framework between the MSP and the client where they can listen and then they can figure out the outcomes that the client wants and drive to those outcomes, that money is so margin insensitive, right? I mean, when you're selling Dell, you're competing against Amazon. When you're helping them, drive their business, cut their staff costs, improve their sales, that's price insensitive work.
Yep.
And it's great work when the MSP can identify it and deliver it. And I think that's one of the things that, again, you're going to see us make a lot of changes this year, primarily to help MSPs deliver, have the framework to build those collaborations to deliver those outcomes for their clients, right? We can't do that, but hopefully we can, as a platform, provide that platform for them to enable those kinds of conversations to get to the outcomes that the clients and the MSPs will thrive on.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're getting near the end of our time together today. I think we were talking a little before the episode when we were chatting. You've got some new things coming into CloudRadial in the not too distant future. Maybe you want to share with our listeners what you might be doing around the world of DNS.
So this is really interesting. For a long time, we were just simply connecting clients to the tech stack, and that really was the PSA, right? So you think about the classic ticketing portal. It's basically connecting the client directly to your PSA through a ticketing portal. Well, we've done that well, and we've done that for years, and we have a great ticketing solution. But the opportunity is really much bigger than that. And what we want to do is just connect everything from the MSP's tech stack, like we've been doing with reporting and training and a bunch of other things, but tying that directly to the client, so when the client can take action without the MSP involved at all. Right. Again, just like today, they can see a report without asking the MSP for the report. We came across an opportunity with a company called Scout DNS, and we've now become a reseller of Scout DNS. And what we're doing with that is we're taking the traditional DNS filtering security layer, and I think we're making some pretty interesting changes there. And what the typical problem there, and this is true across all of the tech stack, so this is one area we're starting to focus on, but it's interesting, is that if you look at the DNS filtering, you got to add, every site is different. Every client is different about what sites they want blocked or allowed, or, you've got, and you also generate a lot of interesting data as to which users are going to which sites. And so anytime the MSPs had interacted with a client about that, they've had to submit a ticket, or the clients had to submit a ticket. They've asked for a report. The MSPs had to print a report. What we've done now with Scout DNS is we've worked with them to basically completely create a client-centric experience around the DNS filtering piece, so that MSP clients can block their own sites, allow their own sites, see their own user reporting, and basically start, in a sense, Big Brother their employee staff. And that's huge, right? Because now this IT hub that the MSP is providing is now the client's gateway to understand the performance and activities of their own employees and staff, right? And I think being able to do more of this, connecting clients directly to the tech stack, making the MSP the facilitator of that IT hub, as opposed to like the magic man that makes everything happen. It's like the ticket now. You submit a ticket, goes to a person does stuff, responds back. I mean, that's not really automation. It's not really connected to the stack, but it's a start, right? Mm-hmm. What we want to do is take, again, more of that MSP out of that interaction and do things like with DNS filtering and across the board, where clients can just do it on their own. And the MSP is the facilitator of that based on the tools and the stack that they put together. So I think this is going to be a real interesting solution for our partners. And ultimately, I mean, based on the impressions we've seen from clients already who have seen this, they're just in love with the ability to kind of spy on their staff, right? Again, in a mobile workforce, knowing what your clients, knowing what your employees doing, it's kind of cool. And DNS shows you that really pretty well. So
that's great.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Well, fellas, we're coming up to the end here. I really appreciate it. Some interesting concepts there. Jeff, for everybody listening, we will be including Jeff's LinkedIn profile with the podcast, and it will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere that you get your podcast. Fellas, I appreciate it, and welcome back to the new year, guys. And it was good having you on, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming
Jeff.
on. Yeah.
Appreciate it.